Hey, it's your friendly ex-Muslim, and I have a soul-searching question I think we all need to ask ourselves. Do I care about evidence? Or will I die as a Muslim no matter what? Let's get into it. Many people I speak to say I will never leave this faith no matter what. I believe it's the truth from God and that's the end of it. That's just what I believe. I'm not willing to reconsider my position. I'm not willing to discuss the evidence. In fact, the only evidence I need is the Quran and Sunnah. Are you someone that presumes a specific position with or without evidence? Ask yourself, if evidence came to you that your position was wrong, that your belief was unfounded, that there was no reason to believe in what you believe in, would you still believe it? Are you willing to die in the same position with or without evidence? Are you willing to stick to that position no matter what anyone tells you? Or do you have the moral courage and confidence and integrity to say, I'm wrong, I made a mistake and I was misguided? Now, what do such people do when doubts come to them? Well, the first thing they do is to avoid doubt. So when something doubtful comes to their mind, they don't read it. They don't want to look into it. They want to shield themselves from doubt. And this is one way that religious people are able to maintain their false beliefs. To avoid doubt completely, to shield themselves, to be in a bubble. Many people do this to their children. They'll put them in Islamic schools. They'll keep them away from certain types of people. They don't want them to think outside the box. They won't let them watch TV or movies, except Islamic ones. And they'll try to control them to the maximum extent possible. Now here's the thing. You can only go so far by shielding yourself. Eventually, something will come to you or your children or whoever that will make you think, this doesn't add up. This is causing my brain a headache, and that's when the cognitive dissonance sometimes kicks in. For example, when the Quran says Allah is He who raised the heavens without any pillars that you can see. Or when He talks about the sun and the moon each going in an orbit, and now you're wondering, what is this talking about? And you're wondering, at the time of Muhammad in the deserts of Arabia, when they looked up at the sky, what would they have believed? Well, they would have believed that the sun and moon were going around the earth in an orbit. In fact, this is a common myth that people used to believe back then. They also used to believe, like many other cultures before them, that the sky was raised up, was pushed up either by God of the sky, or there were two gods, the God of the earth and the God of the sky, and the people in between pushed them up. So now we're faced with a troubling fact. What does a believer do? They could say, I seek refuge in Allah, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, from Satan, they are cursed, and they can say, I'm not going to think about this. I'm going to seek refuge in God, and I'm just not going to consider the possibility that I'm wrong. Or what they'll do is apologetics, mental gymnastics. They'll say, well, it's quite possible. That's not what it means. The Quran saying the earth is going around the sun, the moon is going around the earth, and the sun is going around a 300 million year orbit along the center of the Milky Way galaxy. A 300 million year orbit. That's right. So all of us are going to be dead by the time that orbit is done. Allah talks about it, and He connects the orbit of the sun and the moon to this orbit. He talks about the night and day, and He says it's not for the sun to catch the moon, and it's not for the moon to catch the sun. Or He talks about how the sun and the moon will be joined. Thousands of moons can fit side by side inside the sun, but when you look at them, you don't necessarily know that. And we don't necessarily register the difference in size between the sun and the moon. It was based on modern evidence that we know that. So believers are again stuck and have to come up with some clever gymnastics. These are some examples of things that I came across that caused me doubt. You may have doubt about something totally different. You may have doubt about the treatment of women in Islam, about some of the historical inaccuracies of the stories in the Quran, such as Dhul Qarnayn. Whatever it is, these are some examples, but you could have different examples. The other way of dealing with it, which is much more common with the hadith, is to say, oh no, the hadith can't be authentic. No, it can't be. You find there's an authentic hadith, one that says that there were people who took advantage of the companions and they killed some of Muhammad's companions. When he caught them, listen to what he did. He burned their eyes and he cut off the opposite hands and legs, and he let them basically die in the desert. Someone may read this and say, oh no, that's not authentic, it must be fabricated. But this is in a collection of the most authentic hadith. This is in Bukhari. So if it's fabricated, what do you believe then in Bukhari? They'll appeal to what they think the Prophet is like. They'll say the Prophet was a kind man, he's a merciful man, he's a good man. This is their own opinion about the Prophet, and they'll say he couldn't have done this, it's beyond him to do this. Even though the Quran talks about this very same punishment, and this is the punishment for treason in the Quran, but nevertheless the Prophet couldn't have done that. So what's the other possibility? The other possibility is maybe the Prophet actually did it, but it was a special circumstance. They'll say, oh no, this is not applicable for today. This is a very specific thing that applied only to him and he did that. Well, again, you're contradicted by the fact that it's in the Quran. Or they'll say that maybe Bukhari made a mistake and the Prophet never did this. So there are different ways believers deal with contradictions and problems between reality as we understand it and the text of the Quran and Sunnah, with the moral issues, with the slavery and the injustice and the cruelty we find in the texts. My appeal to everyone is to follow truth, follow reason. If two people came to you and told you this is true, how do you know which one of them is telling the truth? Which one's right, which one's wrong? You would have to go by your reason, and this is how we can do away with false ideas, false religion, and false ideology. The only way we can do this is by following reason, sharpening our intellect and cognitive skills, and not falling for such tricks. Let's not fall for such tricks. Let's not just assume that what we were taught is true. Let's question it. Let's investigate it. And when evidence comes to us that something is false, we need to be brave. We need to confront our fears. We need to look into it and follow the truth. That's the most important thing. Just because someone told you something, just because there's some benefit to you in your personal life of being a Muslim, or because you've invested so much into this, that doesn't mean you have to continue down this path. The road to freedom is a difficult one, but it's one that is well worth it. Be brave, confront your fears, look into these issues, and if you find it to be false, then maybe just you need to change your position like I did. Thank you to all my patrons who continue to support the channel. Thank you to all of you who continue to watch my videos. Also like it and subscribe to the channel. And this is your friendly ex-Muslim, Abdullah Samir, signing out.